I'm Rashonda K. This is Reading with Rashonda. We're reading Our Nig by Harriet E. Wilson, and we are on Chapter 5, A Friend for Nig. Hours of my youth, when nurtured in my breast, to love a stranger, friendship made me blessed. Friendship, the dear peculiar bond of youth, when every artless bosom throbs with truth. Untaught by worldly wisdom how to feign, and check each impulse with prudential rein, when all we feel our honest souls disclose in love to friends, in open hate to foes. No varnished tales the lips of youth repeat, no dear bought knowledge purchased by deceit. By Byron. With what differing emotions have the denizens of earth awaited the approach of today? Some sufferer has counted the vibrations of the pendulum, impatient for its dawn, who, now that it has arrived, is anxious for its close. The votary of pleasure, conscious of yesterday's void, wishes for power to arrest time's haste till a few more hours of mirth shall be enjoyed. The unfortunate are yet gazing in vain for golden-edged clouds they fancied would appear on their horizon. The good man feels that he has accomplished too little for the master, and sighs that another day must so soon close. Innocent childhood, weary of its stay, longs for another morrow. Busy manhood cries, "Hold, hold," and pursues it to another's dawn. All are dissatisfied. All crave some good not yet possessed, which time is expected to bring with all its morrows. That's really very true. All are dissatisfied. Nobody is satisfied with today. We all crave something good that we don't have yet, and we expect that it'll come tomorrow. Was it strange that, to a disconsolate child, 3 years should seem a long, long time? During school time she had rest from Mrs. Belmont's tyranny. She was now 9 years old. Time, her mistress said, such privileges should cease. Oh, wow, at 9 you should stop going to school. Gracious. She could now read and spell, and knew the elementary steps in grammar, arithmetic, and writing. Her education completed, as she said, Mrs. Belmont felt that her time and person belonged solely to her. She was under her in every sense of the word. What an opportunity to indulge her vixen nature! No matter what occurred to ruffle her, or from what source provocation came, real or fancied, a few blows on Nig seemed to relieve her of a portion of ill will. These were days when Fido was the entire confidant of Fredo. She told him her griefs as though he were human, and he sat so still and listened so attentively, she really believed he knew her sorrows. All the leisure moments she could gain were used in teaching him some feat of dog agility, so that Jack pronounced him very knowing, and was truly gratified to know he had furnished her with a gift answering his intentions. Fido was the constant attendant of Fredo, when sent from the house on errands, going and returning with the cows, out in the fields, to the village. If she ever forgot her hardships, it was in his company. Spring was now retiring. James, one of the absent sons, was expected home on a visit. He had never seen the last acquisition to the family. Jack had written faithfully of all the merits of his colored protege, and hinted plainly that mother did not always treat her just right. Many were the preparations to make the visit pleasant, and as the day approached when he was to arrive, great exertions were made to cook the favorite viands, to prepare the choicest table fare. The morning of the arrival day was a busy one. Fredo knew not who would be of so much importance. Her feet were speeding hither and thither so unsparingly. Mrs. Belmont seemed a trifle fatigued, and her shoes, which had, early in the morning, a methodic squeak, altered to an irregular peevish snap. "Get some little wood to make the fire burn," said Mrs. Belmont in a sharp tone. Fredo obeyed, bringing the smallest she could find. Mrs. Belmont approached her, and giving her a box on her ear, reiterated the command. The first the child brought was the smallest to be found. Of course the second must be a trifle larger. She well knew it was, as she threw it into a box on the hearth. To Mrs. Belmont it was a greater affront, as well as larger wood, so she taught her with the rawhide, and sent her the third time for little wood. Nig, weeping, knew not what to do. She had carried the smallest, none left would suit her mistress. Of course further punishment awaited her, so she gathered up whatever came first and threw it down on the hearth. As she expected, Mrs. Belmont, enraged, approached her and kicked her so forcibly as to throw her upon the floor. Before she could rise, another foiled the attempt and then followed kick after kick in quick succession and power till she reached the door. Mr. Belmont and Aunt Abby, hearing the noise, rushed in, just in time to see the last of the performance. Nick jumped up and rushed from the house, out of sight. That is literally kicking someone when they're down. Wow. Aunt Abby returned to her apartment, followed by John, who was muttering to himself. "What were you saying?" asked Aunt Abby. "I said I hoped the child would never come into the house again." "What would become of her? You cannot mean that," continued his sister. "I do mean it. The child does as much work as a woman ought to, and just see how she is kicked about." "Why do you have it so, John?" asked his sister. "How am I to help it? Women rule the earth and all in it." "I think I should rule my own house, John, and live in hell meantime," added Mr. Belmont. John now sauntered out to the barn to await the quieting of the storm. Aunt Abby had a glimpse of Nig as she passed out of the yard, but to arrest her or shew her that she would shelter her in Mrs. Belmont's presence would only bring reserved wrath on her defenseless head. Her sister-in-law had great prejudices against her. One cause of the alienation was that she did not give her right in the homestead to John and leave it forever. Another was that she was a professor of religion. So was Mrs. Belmont. But Nab, as she called her, did not live according to her profession. Another, that she would sometimes give Nig cake and pie, which she was never allowed to have at home. Mary had often noticed and spoken of her inconsistencies. Wow, all right. So the sisters-in-law do not get along, and they particularly don't get along when it comes to Fredo. The dinner hour passed. Fredo had not appeared. Mrs. B made no inquiry or search. Aunt Abby looked long and found her concealed in an outbuilding. "Come into the house with me," implored Aunt Abby. "I ain't going in any more," sobbed the child. "What will you do?" asked Aunt Abby. "I've got to stay out here and die. I hadn't got no mother, no home. I wish I was dead." "Poor thing," muttered Aunt Abby, and slyly providing her with some dinner, left her to her grief. Jane went to confer with her aunt about the affair, and learned from her the retreat. She would gladly have concealed her in her own chamber and ministered to her wants, but she was dependent on Mary and her mother for care, and any displeasure caused by attention to Nig was seriously felt. "I would help you, but it would be too painful for me to help you." I mean, in Jane's defense, she has some sort of disability which prevents her from taking care of herself, but that's something we hear a lot. "Oh, I want to help you, but the cost to me is inconvenience." And I guess I shouldn't be too harsh because I'm the same way, right? "Oh, I want to help you. Oh, it's inconvenient to come and help you, though." Okay, I'll keep reading. Toward night, the coach brought James. A time of general greeting, inquiries for absent members of the family, and a visit to Aunt Abby's room, undoing a few delicacies for Jane, brought them to the tea hour. "Where's Fredo?" asked Mr. Belmont, observing she was not in her usual place behind her mistress's chair. "I don't know, and I don't care. If she makes her appearance again, I'll take the skin from her body," replied his wife. James, a fine-looking young man with a pleasant countenance, placid and yet decidedly serious, yet not stern, looked up confounded. He was pleasant and peaceful and serious and not stern. He is a face full of contradictions. All right, he was no stranger to his mother's nature, but years of absence had erased the occurrences once so familiar, and he asked, "Is this that pretty little Nig Jack writes to me about that you are so severe upon, Mother? I'll not leave much of her beauty to be seen, if she comes in sight. And now, John," said Mrs. B, turning to her husband, "you need not think you are going to learn her to treat me in this way. Just see how saucy she was this morning. She shall learn her place." Mr. Belmont raised his calm, determined eye full upon her and said in a decisive manner, "You shall not strike, or scald, or skin her, as you call it, if she comes back again. Remember." And he brought his hand down upon the table. "I have searched an hour for her now, and she is not to be found on the premises. Do you know where she is? Is she your prisoner?" "No! I have just told you I did not know where she was." Nab has her hid somewhere, I suppose. Oh dear, I did not think it would come to this, that my own husband would treat me so. Then came fast-flowing tears, which no one but Mary seemed to notice. Jane crept into Aunt Abby's room. Mr. Belmont and James went out of doors, and Mary remained to condole with her parent. "Do you know where Fredo is?" asked Jane of her aunt. "No," she replied. "I have hunted everywhere. She has left her first hiding place. I cannot think what has become of her. There comes Jack and Fido. Perhaps he knows." And she walked to a window near where James and his father were conversing together. The two brothers exchanged a hearty greeting, and then Mr. Belmont told Jack to eat his supper. Afterward he wished to send him away. He immediately went in. Accustomed to all the phases of indoor storms, from a whine to thunder and lightning, he saw at a glance marks of disturbance. He had been absent through the day with the hired men. So just to make sure we're clear, this isn't like an actual storm inside. It's Mrs. Belmont and Mary in all their moods. "What's the fuss?" asked he, rushing into Aunt Abby's. "Eat your supper," said Jane. "Go home, Jack." Back again through the dining room and out to his father. "What's the fuss?" again inquired he of his father. "Eat your supper, Jack, and see if you can find Fredo. She's not been seen since morning, and then she was kicked out of the house. Remember, she was literally kicked out of the house." "I shan't eat my supper till I find her," said Jack indignantly. "Come, James, and see the little creature mother treats so." They started, calling, searching, coaxing, all their way along. No Fredo. They returned to the house to consult. James and Jack declared they would not sleep till she was found. Mrs. Belmont attempted to dissuade them from the search. It was a shame a little nigger should make so much trouble. Just then Fido came running up, and Jack exclaimed, "Fido know where she is, I'll bet." "So I believe," said his father, "but we shall not be wiser unless we can outwit him. He will not do what his mistress forbids him." "I know how to fix him," said Jack. Taking a plate from the table which was still waiting, he called, "Fido! Fido! Fredo wants some supper. Come." Jack started, the dog followed, and soon capered on before, far, far into the fields, over walls and through fences into a piece of swampy land. Jack followed close, and soon appeared to James, who was quite in the rear, coaxing and forcing Fredo along with him. A frail child, driven from shelter by the cruelty of his mother, was an object of interest to James. Oh, I guess they're just talking generally. A frail child, any frail child, and they used the masculine pronoun. They persuaded her to go home with them, warmed her by the kitchen fire, gave her a good supper, and took her with them into the sitting room. "Take that nigger out of my sight," was Mrs. Belmont's command, before they could be seated. James led her into Aunt Abby's, where he knew they were welcome. They chatted a while until Fredo seemed cheerful. Then James led her to her room and waited until she retired. "Are you glad I've come home?" asked James. "Yes, if you won't let me be whipped tomorrow." "You won't be whipped. You must try to be a good girl," counseled James. "If I do, I get whipped," sobbed the child. "They won't believe what I say. Oh, I wish I had my mother back. Then I should not be kicked and whipped so. Who made me so?" "God," answered James. "Did God make you?" "Yes." "Who made Aunt Abby?" "God." "Who made your mother?" "God." "Did the same God that made her make me?" "Yes." "Well then, I don't like him." "Why not?" "Because he made her white and me black. Why didn't he make us both white?" And so totally I'm thinking of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye right now and Pecola. "I don't know. Try to go to sleep and you will feel better in the morning," was all the reply he could make to her naughty queries. It was a long time before she fell asleep, and a number of days before James felt in a mood to visit and entertain old associates and friends. So that was Chapter 4 of Our Nig by Harriet E. Wilson. This is Reading with Rashonda, and I'm Rashonda Kate.